We resume our story in Damovot, Molkovia. After 20 minutes of pure bliss, Damien exited the shower, with water dripping down from his body. Grabbing the clean towel hanging close by, he then swiftly dried himself. Now that he was clean, the young man felt much better. While quickly putting on one of the bathrobes hanging on the wall, he noted how their sizes, just like his current height, were smaller than what he had been used to in his previous life. With a hint of curiosity, he pondered. I wonder if I grow taller as I grow stronger. Pushing aside those random thoughts, Damien walked to his room. There, he put on some casual clothes before going back downstairs, where he started cooking for both Seraphine and himself. Taking into account his new ravenous appetite, the young man prepared thrice as much food as he usually ate, making for an incongruous sight once everything was set on the dining table. Then, after calling his adoptive cousin to the table, the two started digging in, with Damien eating so quickly that by the time the redhead's plate was empty, he had already finished 3 of them by himself. Although she could not see anything, she could still hear him chewing his food, prompting her to ask curiously, "Dem, why do you sound like you haven't eaten for weeks? I'm not saying your cooking is bad, but it feels a bit much, don't you think?" Chuckling while patting his comfortably full stomach, he then responded, "Well, I'm still growing, so my body needs the energy." Hearing such nonsense, she would have rolled her eyes if not for having lost them 3 years prior, so she decided to instead retort, "If you don't want to tell me, then just say it. No need for some bullshit excuse." After hesitating for a second, Damien still decided to keep his internal changes secret for a while longer. After all, his situation was anything but simple, and even he felt some confusion about it. In his opinion, it was better to calm his mind and hint at his transformation little by little to avoid scaring them. Of course, it may be him overthinking, but the risks were a tad too great for his liking. Shaking his head inwardly, he then said out loud, "Sarah, once I clean the table in the gym, I'll be in my room working on an idea of mine. In case you need me." Seeing her nod without asking more questions, Damien let out a relieved sigh. After chatting a bit longer, the two separated, with Damien cleaning the table, then putting the plates and utensils in the dishwasher before moving to the gym. There, he grabbed a mop and some cleaning products in a small room close by, and then started to clean the pool of sweat he had left previously. Of course, the rest of the gym would be taken care of by the cleaning staff his aunt hired. After all, the penthouse was objectively too big, making cleaning too much of a time-consuming task for the 4 Mikhailovs. After a few minutes, the young man was finally done with the cleaning. Then, after putting everything back where it belonged, he swiftly headed towards his own room upstairs. Once there, he noted how Adelia was still slumbering soundly on his bed. Having not had a wink of sleep for more than 48 hours, the situation was not exactly surprising to him. In any case, she deserved and needed the rest, so he stayed quiet and went on to do what he had planned previously. While sitting at his computer desk, he pondered on how to maximize his strength growth. Now, his body was in rebuilding mode, and thus needed some time before he could squeeze it again. However, his perk's description mentioned the fact that anything trained would result in general gains. So, following that logic, if he trained his mind, it should also help him grow stronger. Maybe. How to train the mind, though? While pondering that problem, his brain conjured a few ideas. Meditation? That could work. Maybe some mental calculation. Wait, I've read somewhere that learning new things can improve the brain's plasticity, whatever that means. So, trying my hand at learning new stuff while I wait for my body to recuperate should work, right? Well, there was only one way to find out. Thus, Damian booted up his computer and went on a popular course website with topics ranging from languages to mathematics, history, etc. The possibilities were so abundant that it took a while for the young man to decide where to start. Sometime later, he finally made a decision, picking the Mandarin language. There were two reasons for his choice. One, it was a language challenging enough to last him for a while. And two, it was spoken by one of the main countries under the Eastern Front. Done with his selection, Damian then started another training session, this time using his brain instead of his muscles. However, the difficulty was barely lower, as the brain capacity of his previous self had never been considered exceptional. The term mediocre had often been used to describe him at school, which was not really conducive to a high self-esteem. But let's not digress. Fortunately, with the awakening of his memories, his mind felt a lot more agile, as if a lock in his brain had been opened. Thus, time passed quickly, with Damian doing his best to memorize those basic signs through both rote memorization and repetitive writing practice. At first, it felt somewhat obscure, but the longer he spent trying, the easier it became, with the different signs seemingly imprinting themselves in his mind. Still, the cost was great, as after a certain point, his performance started to weaken, with his mind becoming somewhat hazy. Just like working out needed physical stamina, learning anything also needed some kind of mental energy. And it seemed that after spending a few hours cramming his brain with Mandarin, he was running out of the second one. Rubbing his eyes tiredly, he mumbled, "Well, seems like this is my limit for now. Maybe I can try meditating later. From what I heard, it's good for resting the mind." Before he could think further, he heard a rustling noise coming from the bed, prompting him to look toward that direction. There, Adelia was starting to stir awake, a moan even escaping her lips. Grateful for the distraction, Damian waited silently for her to wake up completely. On the middle-aged redhead's side, what greeted her eyes was her adopted nephew's grinning face, the cuts and bruises marring his light skin having already largely faded, at least compared to when he had just awakened this morning. Feeling amused, she asked light-heartedly, "Did you wait here the whole time?" Shaking his head slightly, Damian responded, "Nah, I was working on something on my PC. Anyway, how are you feeling?" Cocking her brow, the slight upturn of her lips rose higher as she retorted, "Shouldn't I be the one to ask you that question? But I'm better, thanks." After letting out a few chuckles, he replied, "It's good then, and I'm also a lot better. Honestly, my face doesn't hurt much anymore. So I'm sure it's only a matter of a few days before I'm completely healed up. Anyway, are you hungry? If you are, I can whip up something for you if you want." After spending a few hours working on my PC, My brain feels like it's been squeezed dry, so I really need a break. Seeing her agree, the two started moving toward the first floor, where Seraphine was still reading her book in the evening light. Indeed, looking at the clock on the wall, Damian noticed it was already 6 p.m., prompting him to ask if the girls wanted to eat dinner early. Tilting her head slightly, Seraphine remarked, "Actually, it's best if we wait for Bryn. I'd feel bad if she came home and she had to eat dinner alone." As he was about to reply, Damian felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, prompting him to check it. Seeing that it came from Bryn, he mumbled, "Speaking of the devil." Coughing to hide his slip-up, he then read the message and relayed the content to the other two. "She said she'd be here in a few minutes, so I might as well start cooking, right? Do you girls have any preference?" After bouncing a few ideas, Damian then went to the kitchen with Adelia before the two started preparing dinner. 10 minutes later, Damian's ears caught the sound of the entrance door's unlocking mechanism, prompting him to turn his head towards it. As his gaze fell on the door, it was not long before it opened completely, unveiling the corridor behind, and more importantly, the tall and dashing woman crossing its threshold. Standing at around 1.80 m, with the family's characteristic bright red hair braided into a long ponytail, and blue eyes as striking as her sharp but attractive features, his oldest adoptive cousin was not an average woman by any means. Indeed, aside from her height and beauty, the loose hoodie and pair of sports pants did little to hide her powerful frame, filled with explosive muscles that those fitness influencers from his past life would have killed to have. Unlike those people, however, her muscles were optimized for combat, something that the aura she subconsciously radiated made clear to even someone like him who knew next to nothing about fighting. She was exceptional, proud, beautiful, and someone he both admired and feared. She was Brynhild Mikhailov, his adoptive cousin and one of the strongest official fighters in the World Fighting League. While Damian fell into a brief daze, the tall redhead's gaze quickly found him. From the injuries on his face to the energy radiating from him, she could tell that the little brat seemed much better, even beyond reason. However, as long as he was fine, she would not ask any question. Instead, she simply let out a sigh of relief and stated calmly, while the corner of her lips rose slightly, "I'm home."
The fortune lady told my mama before I saw the sun, said your boy's gonna love too hard and break more than one. He gonna make sweet women laugh and cry, laugh and cry, laugh and cry, in a whole wide world, laugh and cry. Gonna ask him why, laugh and cry. But you know why I'm torn. Everybody knows I'm torn.